Техник, є Казань.
Внимание! Отбой!
The liberation of the village of Umanskoye near Avdiivka will make it possible for Russian forces to increase pressure on Ukrainian supply routes. Igor Khmakovsky, an advisor to the Donetsk People's Republic's head, told TASS. The liberation of Umanskoye has created additional opportunities to enhance attacks on the roads that are used for providing supplies to the Ukrainian units in Karlovka, he said. In addition, Ukrainian troops remaining in the nearby settlements will come under intensified attacks by the Russian army. The Russian Defense Ministry announced earlier that the settlement of Umanskoye in the DPR had been liberated. Earlier, Russia is making good on promises to attack U.S. and allied weapons shipment points and fuel depots in Ukraine, launching rockets at 5 railway facilities used to funnel critical supplies into the country on Monday. The attacks across western and central Ukraine targeting supply lines and infrastructure come as billions worth of heavy artillery systems, tanks and armored vehicles begin arriving to help Ukraine face off against what is expected to be a full-scale Russian assault in Ukraine. Striking those new, larger shipments, if they come by both rail and road, could prove difficult for Russia over the long run. However, Russia's pilots remain wary of testing Ukraine's air defenses, and the Kremlin will likely need to start conserving some of its long-range precision weapons. Since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion more than 2 years ago, most of Ukraine's international allies have insisted that any weapons they provide be used exclusively within Ukrainian territory. These restrictions were initially imposed to prevent a broadening of the conflict, but a growing chorus of critics now say this approach is preventing Ukraine from defending itself and risks enabling Russian victory. The debate over the use of Western weapons to attack targets inside Russia has rumbled on throughout the war, and has recently been thrust to the top of the agenda by the Russian army's latest offensive. In early May, Russian troops crossed Ukraine's northern border and began advancing toward the country's second city, Kharkiv. This attack was no surprise. On the contrary, Ukrainian military officials had been monitoring preparations on the other side of the border for weeks, but were powerless to act. The NATO Parliamentary Assembly is the latest international organization to voice its support for an end to restrictions on Ukraine's use of Western weapons. Lawmakers from all 32 NATO states adopted a declaration on May 27 urging alliance members to allow strikes on military targets inside Russia. Ukraine can only defend itself if it can attack Russia's supply lines and Russian bases of operation. It is time to recognize this reality and let Ukraine do what it must, stated NATO Parliamentary Assembly President Michal Szczerba. This declaration echoed NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg's May 24 interview with Britain's The Economist, calling on NATO allies to end their prohibition on the use of Western weapons against Russian targets. The time has come for allies to consider whether they should lift some of the restrictions they have put on the use of weapons they have donated to Ukraine, commented Stoltenberg. Especially now when a lot of the fighting is going on in Kharkiv, close to the border, to deny Ukraine the possibility of using these weapons against legitimate military targets on Russian territory makes it very hard for them to defend themselves. A number of senior Western officials have also recently backed an end to restrictions. During an early May visit to Kyiv, UK Foreign Secretary David Cameron announced that Ukraine had the right to use British-supplied weapons for attacks inside Russia. Speaking in Germany on May 27, French President Emmanuel Macron noted that Ukraine was being attacked from Russia. "We must allow them to take out the military sites the missiles are fired from," he commented. The following day, Dutch Defense Minister Kajsa Ollongren said the present ban was forcing Ukraine to fight with one hand tied behind its back, and argued that lifting restrictions should not be subject to debate. The decision to allow Ukraine to hit targets on Russian soil and the delivery of ATACMS missiles was so secret that U.S. lawmakers and others have been demanding the U.S. send longer-range missiles without knowing the decision had already been made and the missiles were already in Ukraine. Grady told AP this week that long-range weapons will help Ukraine take out Russian logistics hubs and troop concentrations behind enemy lines on the Russian side of the border. Grady didn't give details of which missiles had been supplied, but said they will be very disruptive if used properly, and I'm confident they will be. Ukraine has actually already used US-made missiles on targets that are inside Russia's territory, but limited the strikes to the occupied Crimea Peninsula, which the Kremlin sees has Russian sovereign territory, but no one else does. The Kremlin apparently has accepted Ukraine missile strikes on the Crimea as legitimate targets and has not escalated its retaliation, as it is threatening to do now if Ukraine hits targets in the Russian mainland around the city of Belgorod in western Russia. Further, senior Russian security official Dmitry Medvedev stated that Russia was serious when it hinted at the prospect of using tactical nuclear weapons against Ukraine and that the country's dispute with the West might turn into a full-scale war. Eurasian Times noted in previous reports that Russia has continued to engage in nuclear saber-rattling since the initial days of the invasion.